talk series, but very grateful to David to offering to speak to us, and he's very generously offered, before he's given this talk, to give another one. Whether he feels the same at the end of the talk, we will see. But he's
or whether you feel the same at the end.
Or whether we feel the same. But he says there's all sorts of things that have been found under the Portable Antiquities scheme, which we might consider a separate talk on. But David, as you know, is the director of the Wiltshire Museum. And he and I work closely together in that setting, and it's a pleasure to have him with us tonight. David, you've got a group of the stalwart supporters of the Bremhill History Project here, and all of whom will be very interested to hear what you've got to say tonight. So without further ado, I will hand over to you. Please, if I could ask the other listeners to put themselves on mute while David's talking, but he has said he's happy to have the odd interruption, so let's not be too precious about it. It's a small group, so I think we can handle a little bit of dialogue, but there'll certainly be some time for questions at the end. David, over to you.
Okay, thanks. So good evening, everyone. Yeah, it sounds though I've got a formal talk that I'm going to sort of read or something like that. What I've got is a couple of things to show you. Then I've got a quick PowerPoint presentation to bore you with, and then a couple more things afterwards to show you. So, and I'm very happy for you to take yourselves off mute, because I'm showing you things. You may want to be much easier to ask questions as we go along. So don't hesitate to kick in. So the first thing I've got is actually a bit of a mistake, because I was looking for things in our store and found this, which is from Hill Martin. Now I'm going to be quite fancy, because I've got two cameras, and hopefully the other one will be used for showing things, because you don't want to look at me. So there we are. Let me just bring it a bit closer. There we are. So I came across a box which was labelled on the outside Hill Martin and a beaker. So this is a sherd of beaker pottery. Now, beakers date back to about 2,500 BC. And this is a style of pottery brought over with people who were coming from, whose ancestry, if you like, was in the east beyond the Black Sea. So you may have heard of the Amesbury archer. He was buried with beaker. And at this time, these are people who were bringing metal to Britain for the first time. So the Sarsens at Stonehenge had just been put up as these people were arriving on our shores. Now, unfortunately, we don't know anything about the background of this find. The pot is quite delicate, it's handmade, but is extremely fine quality. And perhaps you can see how thin it is if I show you the edge, and it's very well fired. And rather amusingly, on the bottom, it says, from Goatacre, 6 feet below the surface. So that's just up the road from you. But these were normally found being buried with people. So this suggests there's a Bronze Age burial mound somewhere at Goatacre, which of course is just this side of Lynham Airfield for you. It's a very nice bit. My guess it's very similar to some of those from Germany and would date to probably about 2400 BC, something like that. It's not one of the very earliest, but it's pretty early. So not Bremhill Parish itself, but just up the road. But I thought, as I was passing, that was too nice a thing just to pass by.
When was it found, David?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Let me phone a friend.
All right. Well.
And all it says on the back, it doesn't say anything on the back. My guess you see it's got X written on it. That's a very early museum number. So that suggests it was in the museum by about 1900 or thereabouts. So it's probably probably 1870s and 80s, something like that. Right. We know nothing more about it, unfortunately.
Okay.
Very fine, very fine. Okay. Any questions? Nope. Right. Okay. The next thing I got out, this is what I was really looking for. And this is described, I have to put on my gloves. This was found by someone using a metal detector somewhere in the parish. Although all the finds reported to the Portable Antiquities Scheme are on the internet, we don't know, I don't know where they are. The find spots are kept secret or confidential unless somebody has a particular sort of academic reason for knowing. Just being curious doesn't quite cut it. So this was found in 2016 and then was given to the museum a year later, very generously by the detectorist who found it. Now it's quite fun, and it's described, you saw on the packaging, as a buckle. And you can possibly see the decoration on it, sort of the key decoration. And on the side, if you look at the side, you realize that the end here is an animal head. And it's described as a buckle because there are this circular arrangement here and a little catch. Now, I'm afraid I don't quite trust that as an explanation, being a suspicious chap. I've seen things very much like these that are slightly later and are actually clasps for books.
Can you put it down a bit, David? That's, yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm trying to talk as well as sort of thinking about about showing it to you. Clasp for books. So you know, sometimes you get diaries and you get a little clasp that holds it closed. Yeah? Yeah. Yep, got some recognition there. And this may be one of those. Now, the date is really quite interesting because the decoration is vaguely from about 900 to about 1100 AD. So this is very late Saxon, but the decoration is Irish. So you've got this tantalizing idea that maybe you've got a book made in Ireland, and of course, no printing. This would have been, handwritten, copied out, a book from Ireland that was in your parish in the late Saxon period. We've got a few other finds from Ireland elsewhere in Wiltshire, and the suggestion has to be that they may have come from Malmesbury Abbey, which was sacked by the Vikings. And the Vikings would have taken anything that looked vaguely pretty. And maybe, you can imagine them sort of sitting with a bag of loot and saying, well, I'll have this is rubbish, sort of sorting it out. Maybe that's the sort of thing they were doing. Nice story. Whether it's true, I have no idea at all. But it's a nice little thing. And of course, today it's green. It's made of bronze, so it would have been sort of bright, shiny gold color when it was new, may even have been gilded originally, and quite possibly have enamel into the cells of that decoration. So it'd been quite a nice thing. Okay, any questions? No?
Stunned by the
silence.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can take my gloves off now. Oh, actually, I'll put it back in the bag. Then I don't need to use my gloves again. Use
Presumably,
gloves.
David, coming from Ireland, would have been a sort of Christian. It's most likely
yes,
been.
Yes. Sorry, and hence why I say Malmesbury, because any book would have been religious.
Yeah.
It would have been a Bible or a Psalter or something like that. It would have been a manuscript of some description, and incredibly rare. Even the libraries of the biggest monasteries of this sort of date would only have had sort of 50 or 100 books at most. So, Malmesbury Abbey would have had no more than, say, 50 books. So to find a bit of one of them is really quite, if I'm right, is really quite interesting. So, right, back to me, I'm afraid. And I'm going to show you now, I'm going to share a presentation with you about something that we've got from the museum that came from Caen. So I just have to go back to Zoom, share my screen. And hopefully you can see it says the Khan Fates.
Yep.
Yep, you've got that? Right.
Yep.
So a great story, this. I got an email from Angelo Harrison, who is the bursar at St Margaret's School in Caen, on just your side of Caen. And he emailed this through and said, do you think this is interesting? Now, what I didn't quite appreciate was the boot on the side. So if you sort of remember that and think about the size of this thing. I sort of zoomed in on it and I thought, I know what this is. This is a Roman sculpture. There's quite a lot in the Cotswolds, and there are 3 mother goddesses sort of lined up in a row. And these things are about the size of an A4, an A4 book turned sideways. And they're quite, the stone is quite thin. And they would have been in a little household shrine. So, oh, that's simple. So I asked my colleague Lisa, the curator, to go and pick it up on her way into the office. What I hadn't realized was quite how enormous it was. This is where it was found, on the north side of the school grounds, just in a rockery. The school is actually on the side of a quarry. So this must have been found while they were quarrying and put to one side because it looked interesting. And then it just laid in amongst a whole bunch of other stones for a long time. And I asked this chap, the Reverend Dr. Martin the Ashmolean Museum. He is the go-to man for sculpture, Roman sculpture. And perhaps you can now see the depth of the stone. Lisa, it was not very sensible to ask Lisa to pick it up. It takes 2 people to lift it as a minimum, and you can only lift it sort of about 2 feet. You know, it really is enormously heavy. And here he is picking off the moss. And there we are, loading it onto a van. A chap who runs Minerva Stone Conservation, he very kindly offered to conserve it for us. And so this is us loading it into his van. That's what it looked like when it got to his lab. And that's what it was like after steam cleaning. And then he left it with a clay poultice for 3 weeks to just sort of pull out the remainder of the roots. And you can see the sculpture is looking in much better nick. Then we brought it back and put it on display. But the obvious question is, what does it show? This is one of the sort of an image of, this is one from Pompeii, but this is one of the 3 mother goddesses, but it's the sort of thing I thought this was. But what Martin spotted was that this is nothing of the sort. These are the 3 fates. In fact, and I can never remember quite why, these aren't just the fates of the Roman world, these are the fates of the Greek world. So you can see the figures. This one is holding the, oh God, this is called, it's the something of life, string, rope.
The thread?
The thread, thank you, the thread of life. The one here is holding a set of balances, so they're weighing up whether you were good or evil. And rather indistinct, but this one has essentially a ruler and is carrying a pair of scissors, because she decides when the thread of life is cut, and therefore when you've had it. At the top is quite interesting because I think it's this one. There's a nail has been hammered into the top of the stone. Now, that's something the Romans did when they were putting in a prayer or a curse. They would hammer it to a piece of stonework. So it's the same way as, you know, if you go into a church and there are some candles and you leave a prayer alongside the candles, it's that same idea. And also, it's quite good on this. Oh, the annotation's gone, sorry. is you might be able to see what looks like an O there and some other things. This could be writing, this could be an inscription, but we don't know yet. We're still waiting for the expert, the real expert on inscriptions, to come and take a look. But so these are the Greek fates, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. Don't ask me, I can just read it. And the interesting thing is that this is just not a bit of sculpture. This is from a tombstone. And the nearest example that Martin Hennig could come up with was this, which is in Germany. And you can see it's a whacking great big monument. And the thing at Caen, the stone at Caen, has mortar on the top and the bottom and the sides, which means it's part of a larger monument. It was also meant to be seen at eye height. So by the time you sort of imagine it propped up at, you know, shoulder height, something, other stones on top, you're talking a really seriously big monument. There's evidence at Caen of there being a Roman villa, and we've got the sort of guess that it's potentially a villa of someone who's really important, perhaps even to the level of a provincial governor. This, of course, Caen, just like today, is on the A4 between London and Bath, and also not far from the road heading up towards Cirencester. That ran just to the east of Swindon. So if you've got a posh country house there, it's easy to get to the important places. London, obviously, the main centre. Cirencester was the second city of Roman England, Roman Britain. And then Bath was, of course, the place to go and have fun, you know, place to relax. So think of it as a, you know, posh summer house, which is really quite interesting. So the stone, if you want to come and see it, is in the museum. One day, I'd love to have a full-scale reconstruction of what that monument might have been, but I think I'll have to wait for a bit. It would take up most of the museum if we try to do that.
David, what other sort of Roman finds or evidence is there in the vicinity? We had there was a talk at the conference last week about some of the recent excavations and geophysical at Wiltshire. Anything from that that's worth sharing with this group?
Yeah, well, Wiltshire is at Sandy Lane, so that's on the Chippenham Devizes Road, and there's a town just to the south of Sandy Lane itself, or southeast. That was quite a significant town, but it's not really been investigated, and it's still it's under plough. So, but there's a huge number of fields around it. There's various burials. There's lots and lots of finds. There's evidence of ironworking immediately to the south. You know, it's not just a small place. This is a significant town. And going just a bit further along to Beanacre, just below Corsham, there's another town there. Rather smaller probably, but still, you know, quite significant. And there's a whole stretch of Roman villas through the landscape. And there's a Roman settlement, for example, a Roman villa up at Lynham, so just to the north of you. And there's a good smattering of Roman finds throughout your parish. So, you know, there's stuff going on.
Yeah. Robert, you've got a question. You're waving your hand.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Hi, David.
Hi.
I live in Caen. So I live not far from St Mary's School. Is the supposition that what is now St Mary's School would have been a Roman villa? Or how did that altarpiece get there?
Oh, well, I think it's, sorry, I should have explained. I think it's a funerary monument. It's a tombstone, or yeah, it's a, you know, proper monument rather than so it's not where the villa was. That would suggest that's where the cemetery was. There's scant, sort of a little bit of evidence, but I think it's quite convincing that there was a substantial Roman building on top of Castle Hill. Our field group did some excavations a number of years ago, and they found a few tesserae and some bits of painted wall plaster, which is pretty convincing evidence that there's a significant building there. But the building, where they were excavating, had been trashed by later quarrying. So there's not very little evidence of it, but just finding painted wall plaster and a tesserae, mean you've got a posh Roman villa.
And David, there was a Roman villa at Studley as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can't remember much about that, but there's a big one there. It's because it's just like sort of Georgian country houses. They cluster just off the main roads because it's easy then to get to London and go and see your friends, but you're in the countryside and you can get all your slaves growing lots of food and making money for you. Nothing changes.
Robert, another.
Yeah, I'll stop. I'll just do the follow-up, Martin. Thank you. David, whereabouts on Castle Hill are the remains of Roman decoration fragments you talked about?
Yeah, the excavation was just in the park, so just behind, just at the top of the hill, just behind the park, in the park.
I know exactly what it is. The excavation done in 2010 by your people.
Yeah.
Okay, and you found Roman. I didn't realise the Roman stuff was found there. I knew that you'd uncovered the remains of the Anglo-Norman house. I didn't realise Roman stuff had been found there as well.
More about that actually, but certainly there were some bits that are quite difficult to date. But there was definitely a Roman wall and a few bits and pieces. But the issue is that when you're digging stuff up, you don't always know what you're finding. It's when you get it back and clean it up and wash it, you suddenly realise what's been discovered.
Oh, I'd love to. I'll email you, David, if I can. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
There's a report on it on our archaeology field group has a website, and the full report is up on there.
Okay, thank you.
So the archaeology field group have been looking for some Roman. We're looking for vessings, but looking for a Romano-British settlement possibility up towards the Lynham Air Base. But frustratingly, we haven't been able to do any test pitting this year, or any further test pitting. But there's still an expectation there may be something there because there's been quite a lot of small Roman finds, particularly of pottery in that area.
Yeah, and there was enough coming up in the one test pit that was done to make you very suspicious that there's something there.
We'll have to wait till we can do a bit more of a bigger dig. Any other questions for David on the Khan fates?
No? Okay, in which case I will do my fancy stuff and switch back to the other camera. Okay, and what I've got now are some tiles from Stanley Abbey. So we've got 2 boxes of tiles, but I think these are quite fun. So these are floor tiles. This one, I've got a couple of complete ones, but starting off with this one. But these are from the Abbey, and they are floor tiles. And as you can see, they're quite thick. They're very chunky. And when you go into many churches, you see Victorian versions of these, but this is a pucker one. This is 14th century, and we know these were made at Nash Hill, just to the east of Lake, so the top by Lacock, but by sort of Spy Park, that sort of area. Lovely decoration with the stars, which that probably goes there, doesn't it? The way these are made is obviously laying out clay in a mold and then pressing down. This is a slip, which is sort of plastered, sort of painted over the top, and then they're fired and glazed. Very resilient surface. So these, when there's an ecclesiastical building, they do tend to survive in large quantities because you can get them up, you can use them somewhere else, and if you can't get them up, then they just get smashed as people are after other bits. So really rather nice.
Do we know what the symbolism of the star is in that context, David?
I don't.
No.
Somebody else might. There's a series of stock designs. There's about 80 designs that were being churned out at
Kate's waving a hand.
Nash Hill.
Oh, not an answer, just a question. I'm interested in the stars. Are they all standard? Do you think they've been done with a template or freehand?
No, it's done with the template.
Mm. And in the center of the star, is that the base color coming through?
It is, yeah.
Ah,
So they might be spur rowels rather than stars, I guess. But I've only just thought of that when you asked the question.
Thank you. Thanks.
And were they found by the Breakspear excavation in the early 20th century or when?
Probably.
Yeah.
This is the second one. So this is a complete tile. Let me get it right. There we go. Which gives you an idea of the size. You know, you can see my hand. So that's 6 inches square, literally 6 inches. You know, they're all pretty much the same size, as you can see. Fantastic checkerboard pattern. And you just have to think of, you know, seeing the floor of a church or the dining hall or the refectory or something like that with these on the floor. It would have been absolutely stunning. Bearing in mind, most people, you know, ordinary people would have had rush matting on the floor that they'd have chucked out every few weeks with all the muck that had accumulated. You know, it's a real lesson in how well off and, you know, how differently churches were constructed. These probably were in the church and in sort of the most important rooms in the abbey, rather than, you know, in all sort of the places like kitchens and things like this. This would only be for the very best places, as you can imagine. And what's quite fun, on the back, you can see where they've scored holes in. That's for two reasons. One is that helps moisture come out, sort of evaporate as the tiles are fired. But also that, of course, then is keying for mortar. And you can see the, in cross section, can you see that? No, it's a bit difficult to show. Oh, maybe like that. Can you see the way they're angled in, which means that the mortar goes in here, and it's very easy to get them butted very, very closely up to each other, and yet still have mortar filling in the gaps. Makes the pointing easy. And then my last one.
Wow.
Is that, which is fabulous. So that, I'm sure that's heraldic, and often, you know, sometimes the shields and the heraldry are just made up, but sometimes they are, you know, they do relate to the family that paid for a particular chapel, for example. Because the idea was, if you endowed the church with a chapel, the priest would say a mass for your soul, and you'd get to heaven, as opposed to being in limbo for eternity. So it's a way of making sure you got to heaven quicker. But that's really stunning.
Again, David, would that have been a floor tile, or do you think that would have been a wall tile?
No, they're all floor tiles. They weren't used on the walls. So all floor tiles.
Yeah, not in their jacuzzi or shower room then.
Only after the dissolution of the monasteries, when someone stole them.
Well, a brief commercial interlude. Our next talk is going to be on Stanley Abbey and the post-dissolution era and the impact of it on the surrounding area. So I will circulate a notice of that soon, but we hope to get that in December, so we can pick up on the what became of the bits of Stanley Abbey. David, any idea when this was found again in the early 20th century exploration?
That's right. Someone mentioned when the excavations were.
Yeah, Helen, I think so. It was Breakspear, wasn't it, who did the work?
Sorry, you're on mute.
Breakspear, about 1907.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got 2 boxes of these, but you can see if your other speaker knows what the heraldry relates to.
That's a nice, nasty trick question for him.
That's the beauty of being an archaeologist. I don't have to even pretend to know anything about heraldry.
John, we might try and get some photographs of those. They're rather fine, aren't they?
I've actually made a note and a drawing to do exactly that.
We have a perennial challenge of trying to find some attractive imagery to go in the book that we're producing, and something like that.
Visualize where I was going to put it too, so that's marvelous.
Great.
Well, and we do have
interestingly
2 boxes of them, so you can have fun.
The entrance way that is now sitting at the top of the hill overlooking Laycock, which it's been moved twice. It was moved to Bromham, wasn't it? And part of the monastery was rebuilt as quite a big manor house there, from memory, and it was then moved again to Spy Park. So is there any evidence of floor tiles that exists in that entity, or is it just been dug up by Breakspear?
Never been in.
We'll have to ask the Enthovens what's in their triumphal arch. It's a rather fine piece. I think it was the Baintons who moved it, wasn't it?
It was, yes, Sir Edmund Bainton.
But they're unlikely to have moved floor tiles at the same time.
Yeah.
Can I just say that some time ago, and when I say some time ago, it's probably about 20 years or more, I read that a mosaic from Stanley Abbey actually was taken down to Stanley in the Falklands and given to the church in Stanley in the Falklands. Now, I'm positive I didn't imagine that. I read it. I can't remember where I read it. And when I was actually in Stanley in the Falklands, I went into the church and asked them about it. They knew nothing. Now, maybe I picked up the wrong end of the stick, but I really can't remember. But it is in my mind that, and as I say, it was some 20 years ago.
Sounds like a good Google challenge.
Yes, I mean, it's a great pity if something like a mosaic did actually go down to the Falklands. It's a great pity that something like that gets lost, because mosaic gets put in the outhouse, and then 20, 30 years later, someone says, "What's all this?" And uses it for infill on a footpath or something like that.
Yeah.
There's certainly plenty of history and a bit more detail on what became of bits of Bradenstoke Abbey, as Randolph Hurst pulled that around. So there's form in despoiling monuments right from post-dissolution right the way through the 20th century.
Yes, and the mere fact that I read that it went to Stanley in the Falklands, the name, of course, was the link there, and the church.
Yeah. Any other questions for David on those fine tiles from Stanley?
David, can I fire a belated question?
You can have a go.
The stone that you found in Caen, is it a local stone? Is it a Cotswold stone, a limestone, or
Yeah,
I mean, it's Bath stone just down the road?
Yeah, it comes from a geologist chipped a bit off when we weren't looking. It comes from Chasselton, not Chasselton. Oh, blimey.
Horsham?
No, yeah, it's a village just to the sort of southwest of, between Corsham and Box and south a bit.
Right,
Hazelton.
right. Yes, there's a number of underground quarries
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So we know which quarry it comes from.
Basically, it's
And if you think of the size,
basically it's
if you think of the
Boston.
size of it, you wouldn't get many of those on a cart,
Mm.
and it would have to travel by along the A4, along the Roman A4. So it again, that underlines how impressive a monument that was,
Thank you very much.
and therefore how important the person was who was buried under it.
Good. David, what else, not that you're going to talk us through it in detail, anything else that you'd encourage people to look at that's possibly available online or when the museum opens up that's got a Bremhill connection?
Well, the website, our website has got, if you go to, there's a section on it called collections, go to collection search, you can tap Bremhill in, and you get 206 entries. So only a few of those are archaeological finds or objects. A lot of them are photographs, engravings, and watercolors. So there's a real variety on there.
And quite a few of them would have images on the website.
Quite a lot have images. About 20% have images, perhaps 30% if you're lucky. I know because I was looking the other day to prepare for this. So there's plenty on there.
And sadly, it's not open at the moment. But when it is open, you would be, if you want to book an appointment, anybody to see anything there, then you can make contact with the museum.
Yeah. And we've also got on display in our medieval gallery is an iron dagger that's from Bremhill, which has got a maker's mark that it's made in London. That's probably dating to about 1400, 1450.
I think that was found by someone from Titherton Lucas in a field down by the River Avon, if I remember.
I think you are exactly right.
Yeah.
And David, wasn't there something else found in Hillmartin recently?
Oh yeah,
the lead.
Yeah, quite. It's quite interesting. There's a whole. For some reason, detectorists have been finding a whole bunch of hoards of late Roman sort of metal vessels, and they found a whole bunch at Hillmartin, made of lead. So it's a variety of sort of plates and bowls and a little cup as well. When I say lead, it's really pewter.
Right.
But of course, the nearest source of lead, of course, is the Mendips. So it's sort of relatively locally made. And going back to Wiltshire, there's an awful lot of lead on the surface there. We've been donated finds made by a detectorist. And there's a heck of a lot of lead. So I wonder if they're not working lead there as well. So the idea being you get a pig of lead on a cart, bring it to somewhere, and then it's broken up and used to make things with. And those, I think it's that hoard. The chap who found it decided to put the hoard into the dishwasher to clean it. This is about the worst thing you could possibly do. Because
Yes.
lead is very, when it comes out the ground, it looks quite stable, but it very quickly deteriorates. And when I say very quickly, I mean, it can be a day or two and then you're left with nothing but powder.
So if you take nothing else from today's talk, don't put your Romano finds in the dishwasher, please, chaps and chapesses.
Quite. If
David,
you find
thank
anything, don't do anything to it. Show it to museum finds liaison officer. Yeah.
So thank you very much, David, for that. A little exploration into some of the things that are around. As you said before we started, there's quite a few things in the Portable Antiquities Scheme which we might look to do a talk on next year for this group and a wider group. Any final questions for David about the things archaeological, and I'm sure he'd answer slightly wider questions, but with a linkage to today's topic.
As long as it's not heraldry.
As long as it's not heraldry. No. Oh, Robert.
Robert's waving his hand.
The voice of Khan.
The proud voice of Khan, yeah. David, when I came into the talk, you were talking about your beaker find, which you were obviously enthralled by. So can you just rewind and say a couple more things about that, because I was just warming up at that stage.
Right.
And the second question, David, is that you talked about the Amesbury Archer, then you mentioned the Black Sea. Are you suggesting that the lad walked from the Black Sea to Amesbury and then got shot?
Not quite.
Oh, thank you. Could you give me your truth, please?
Yeah, I'm just changing camera. So that's the sherd of Beaker Pot. Comes from Go Taker by Hilmartin. We don't know any more about it than that. There's a label on the back saying found 6 feet under the surface. But beakers, and especially that good quality, are only found with burials. So there's a beaker burial. And my guess is that's going to date to about 2400 BC, give or take 50 years. The beakers come with the people who are buried with beakers brought metal to Britain. They brought copper and gold and bronze working and the knowledge of how to do that. But it's also, when you look at the DNA, their DNA is different to that of the pre-existing Neolithic population. And their DNA has its roots in the Yamana people whose ancestry was beyond the Black Sea. So the chap that this was almost certainly buried with wouldn't have come from the Black Sea. He wouldn't have hopped on an EasyJet flight or a Wizz Air flight. But perhaps his great grandparents might have done. The idea of sort of beakers and the knowledge of metal and the people themselves sort of spread across Europe over a 200 to 300 year period. So it's a colonization. That's quite weird, because when I was at university, we were being taught that there was the beaker people who came in this wave across Europe. And then there was a change that, in fact, it's just like saying that because we've all got iPads, that we're all Californian and we wear sandals and have long hair. It was, the suggestion then was that beakers are very much, if you like, a fashion, and it's a change in culture, not of people. And then DNA evidence is changing that back to as it was before. Yes, it was a movement of people. But then when they got here, it appears that, well, today we've sort of, or by the time you get to sort of the Iron Age, most of the people who are being buried have got beaker type DNA rather than the pre-existing that of the pre-existing Neolithic people. Now, whether the beaker people bumped off the existing Neolithic people, or they brought a disease with them, or as my wife put it, they were tall, blonde and good looking, and therefore more successful at attracting young ladies, there are a variety of mechanisms by which that might have happened. But certainly we have very little Neolithic DNA in our current population. It's predominantly beaker DNA. And then, of course, you've got to chuck in the people who arrived here in the Roman period and Saxons and all the rest of it.
It's one thing we haven't thought to investigate yet is the DNA of the Bremhill Parish as part of this group. I think it might give rise to all sorts of questions which are possibly not best addressed.
I should say, sorry, I hadn't finished the Amesbury Archer bit. With the Amesbury Archer, we do know he came from the Eastern Alps. If you think Austria, you won't be far wrong. And the reason we know that is when you're young, the water you drink has got minerals in, and that gets embedded in the enamel in your teeth. And so it's a signature of where you grow up and where you've moved. And his teeth clearly show that he came from the Eastern Alps. So he did move. And Stonehenge was built allegedly by the late Neolithic people, and 50 years later, the Beaker people arrive. Now, I rather doubt that. I suspect Stonehenge, the Sarsens may be a reaction in some way to the arrival of this new group of people, new ideas, new technologies. But the jury's out at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, David, thank you very much for the talk, and we look forward to the portable antiquities talk in due course. But much appreciated by us all, lightening up these dark winter nights. So yes, a little round of applause from the assembled Bremhill company. And
Thank you.
yes, please all go, and as soon as the museum's open again, please go and
Do come and
look
see,
at the
yeah.
wonderful collection that's there and visit the archive. When do we hope to be open for business again, David?
Well, assuming we're in tier 1 or 2, Thursday week.
Right.
That's what, the 3rd of December.
Yeah.
We're
Great.
open Thursdays to Saturdays, pre-booked, please. So, because of COVID restrictions and all that, you can book from the website.
And you get to see the magnificent manky lion that's behind David's shoulder there, which is not a find from the parish, but there's a whole story behind that for another day. Thank you very much, everybody. Good to see you all. Thank you for organising, Sarah.